Bring this man out. Wow. He has been a deputy Peace Corps director. He has been a publisher at Newsday, a special assistant to President Lyndon Johnson. He's written many books. The most recent, Moyers on Democracy, is now out in paperback. But he's best known for his work with CBS News and now PBS, where Bill Moyers' Journal is seen every Friday. He's won every major award, including 30 Emmys. Please welcome the conscience of American journalism, Bill Moyers. Bill, what an honor. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
I can't tell you, I mean that. That is a real honor. There's no one like you. I was going to say there's too few, but there's nobody. So I'm going to pick your brain for the next half hour, if I may.
That won't take a half hour, but go ahead.
Well, it'll seem shorter. The first thing I want to ask about is the health care debate, because that is obviously what is dominating the news in this country now. You are in a unique position because you were there for some of the fights in the 60s, like civil rights, Medicare, Social Security. How do you compare this fight to those fights?
This is harder because there's more money on the side of those who oppose health care reform than there was in the 60s. Money was important in the 60s, but It wasn't as pervasive and as powerful as it is today. Having been there, I find it hard, Bill, to understand why this country has not embraced the notion of health care as a common human need to which everyone should have access regardless of their economic resources. I just don't understand that.
Well, does it have something to do with the Democratic Party, which was the party of progressive issues in the 60s? And it doesn't seem to be a party that can any longer really stand up for progressive causes the way it used to, or win those policy battles. Why is that?
I don't think the problem is the Republicans. They are totally against health care reform. Why shouldn't they be? They don't want to give Barack Obama the greatest progressive breakthrough in domestic policy since Lyndon Johnson and Medicare. It's to their interest as a party not to let Obama get an advantage that'll help reelect him in 2012. So don't count on the Republicans. The problem is the Democratic Party. This is a party that has told its progressives, who are the most outspoken champions of health care reform, to sit down and shut up. That's what Rahm Emanuel, in effect, the chief of staff at the White House, told progressives when they stood up as a unit in Congress and said, no public insurance option, no health care reform. And I think the reason for that is that in the time since I was there, 40 years ago, the Democratic Party has become like the Republican Party, deeply influenced by corporate money. I think Rahm Emanuel, who's a clever politician, understands that the money for Obama's reelection will come primarily from the health industry, the drug industry, and Wall Street. And so he is a corporate Democrat who is determined that there won't be something in this legislation, if we get it, that will turn off those powerful interests.
The Democratic Party, though, Lyndon Johnson was the last Democrat who really, it seemed to me, won an election based on democratic values and democratic virtues. Every other Democratic victory that's come after it more or less came because the Republicans screwed up so badly.
That's right.
Nixon, Gerald Ford, okay, that was a Republican scandal. Then we got Jimmy Carter. And then after the first Bush, that was not a successful presidency. We got Bill Clinton. And now we have Barack Obama after the disaster that was the next Bush. It seems like the Democrats can't win an election on their own.
The two reasons for that: we have had a conservative revolution in this country over the last 30 years, and a lot of the values in politics have shifted in that direction. But you've also, go back to what we said a moment ago, money in politics. You've also had in the last 30 years the Buckley versus Vallejo decision by the courts, which allowed money to flow into politics in
right.
a flood.
Saying money was free speech.
Saying money was free speech.
Where did they get that?
Well, it goes back to the efforts in the last part of the 19th century to begin to give corporations the right of personhood.
Right.
And that's what it. So if you as a citizen can contribute to a party, a corporation should be allowed to contribute to a party. That's the way the legal rulings have been have been going. But money has flowed in such a flood into both parties that the Democratic Party gets a lot of its support from the very interest that when the Republicans are in power, financially support the Republicans. You really have essentially, except for the progressives on the left of the Democratic Party, you really have two corporate parties who are, in their own way, in their own time, serving the interest of basically a narrow set of economic interest in the country, who, as Glenn Greenwald, who's a great analyst and journalist, wrote just this week, those narrow interests seem to win, determine the outcomes. No matter how many Democrats are elected, no matter who has their hands on the lever of power, these narrow interests determine the outcomes, even when they have to run, in Washington, even when they have to run roughshod over the interest of ordinary people. And I'm sad to say that's happened to the Democratic Party. Look at the flow of money as it shifted from the Bush administration and the Bush Congress to the Democrats in the last 2 to 4 years.
Am I wrong to say that the two things that are at the very heart of our problem are greed and ignorance?
Well, we come back to the first point you made about health care. We are the only Western democracy that has not embraced universal health care as a means of social justice. Our health care system is run by the drug industry, the health insurance industry, and Wall Street, which means a relative handful of unaccountable executives and anonymous investors whose primary interest is in increasing the value of the company share and raising profits. That's their interest. Now, that's a good business model because it's made a lot of money for the people who run those industries, Wall Street, drugs, and health insurance. But it's not the way we should decide who lives and who dies, right, and who suffers and who gets well. That's just not the way. And yet, because money is the measure of success today and profits, both parties serve the for-profit motive. That's why I would rather see Barack Obama go down fighting for vigorous, strong, principled public insurance,
right,
than to lose with a bill. Look, Business Week had a cover story last week. The insurers are winning. Everybody knows that the White House has already made a deal with the drug industry,
right,
promising not to import cheaper drugs from Canada and Europe, promising not to use the government to negotiate for lower prices. That deal's been cut. Much better that Barack Obama go back to this public insurance for everybody. Universal health care, run by the government with tough cost controls to which everybody can join, employees and individuals, and which puts the care of the patient back in the hands of the doctor.
And he never...
And lose. If he were to do that and lose this fight, this fall, I guarantee you it would reinvigorate the party that we all know is suffering now from not being sure who it is and who it's for.
And he never really effectively has, yet anyway, made it a moral issue.
He started just recently, just a few days ago, he talked about health care as a moral issue. But it is a moral issue. It's not an economic issue.
When Kennedy broached the civil rights issue, which was a much harder issue to broach than even health care in 1963, that speech he made, I've seen the tape many times, he says, right at the beginning, we are confronted primarily with a moral issue. It's been 100 years since the Civil War. We're still treating the Negroes, as he called them then, in a way as a second-class citizen. I haven't heard anything similar to that from this president.
Harry Truman in 1948, Bill, fought for Medicare, the first president to really get out there and fight for it. He lost. But because he lost in a principled victory, the AMA beat him, we were able, 20 years later, to come back and get Medicare passed. And when Lyndon Johnson flew to Independence, Missouri, to sign the Medicare legislation in the presence of Harry Truman, I thought, you have to lose sometimes in order to win. And that's why it's more important. People are saying, well, better to have half a loaf. No, half a loaf doesn't feed the crowd. It doesn't. It's better not to have a half loaf than to lose with the whole loaf out there that would serve everybody. And then come back and fight for it again.
You helped make famous the author Joseph Campbell.
Yes.
And one of his great quotes was, if you want to change the world, change the metaphor. And we read metaphors all the time in the paper from politicians. A rising tide lifts all boats, for example, is a great metaphor that's been used by politicians, usually on the right. Not really a true metaphor, is it? What would be a true metaphor that we could use now that would change this?
We're all in the same boat. That would be the metaphor. And that's the moral, the moral message that America would send by adopting health care as a human need to which everybody should have access. The moral message would be that we are in this together, that we care about each other. All of us who have means will give up something in order to make sure